Love fam, it's your girl, the Civilized Savage, and welcome to Between Me and You. Open reflections from the pages of my journal, and this is journal entry number 4. Now, we didn't have a journal entry last week, and I was not going to mention it, but for the sake of accountability, I think it's worth saying out loud. From now on, a journal entry will drop every Wednesday at 8:30. And I'm saying it publicly so I can be held to account by you guys and I can hold myself accountable to ensure that I keep sharing content with you guys. So, this week, I wanted to talk about finding, using, and owning your voice. The reason this topic is on my heart is because the past week I had two very challenging conversations. One with a long-standing friend of mine, and the other was with someone I have just kind of started getting to know. And yeah, after that second conversation, I'm not sure where we're at, if I'm honest. I'm not sure where we are. But both of these conversations left me with the same realization, despite being very different conversations. And that was simply that my voice matters. My voice is valid. And I absolutely need to be able to express myself unapologetically. Now, don't get me wrong, standing on your truth isn't always easy. It can be scary to, as they say, stand on business, especially when it comes to your own personal truth. It can be uncomfortable to say what you actually want, what you actually need, how you want to be met in a relationship. And when I say met, I don't mean catered to, I mean met, seen, heard, considered. For me, in both of the situations I was talking about, that's all I wanted. Like, I just wanted to be met. But sometimes it can feel super exposing to say those things out loud. It can make you feel, let me keep it about myself. I felt, and I often feel, very vulnerable when I have to speak to somebody about how their behavior has affected me or what I need moving forward or what I will or won't accept in my life. And let me be clear, nobody can make us feel any type of way, but people's actions can absolutely impact how we experience ourselves and our relationships. So the question that came up for me was, how can I use my voice to express my deepest, most honest truth? And I have to give myself credit for this week because I think I did speak my deepest, honest truth in the conversations that I had this past week. Both of these conversations were challenging, but for very different reasons. In one situation, someone I was building a potential collaborative connection with said something to me that landed a little left of center for my liking. It felt unnecessary. And I could have left it and let it slide. Most people do, because letting things slide is easier, right? It's easier to not say anything than get into a potential conflict. Who wants conflict? Like, nobody. Who wants to rock the boat of a potential working relationship or a personal connection? Nobody, right? But here's what I realized. If I let something slide from early, I'm teaching people that this is acceptable. And if someone thinks that something is acceptable, guess what's going to happen? They're going to keep doing it. So for me, it became important to say something, not aggressively, not defensively, but definitely clearly, because people need to know how to treat you. And part of owning your voice, in my opinion, is letting people know how you expect them to conduct themselves in your space and in your life. Because, I mean, when you think about it, that's the very definition of a boundary, not just setting it, but holding it. I think that's where a lot of us fall short. We say the thing, but we don't stand firm on it. And I think this might be a key point to mention, that using our voice isn't solely about the things that we express verbally. I think that finding voice is also about what we show people and not just what we say to them. And speaking of how we show things to people, I think one of the things that I was really proud of myself for about the two conversations that I had this past week was the way that I conducted myself. Was I perfect in my interactions? Probably not. In comparison to my previous self, did I do better? Absolutely, yes, I did. And for those of you who know me, you know that I have a very fiery nature. I can be very reactive. I can legit go from 0 to 100 in 2.5 seconds. Like, it's not even difficult. But in both of these conversations, I didn't do that. Be proud of me. I know I'm proud of me too. Instead, you'll be happy to know, I slowed down. I took my time to respond. I thought about what I was saying before I said it. In one of the conversations, I even said out loud, mid sentence, let me just take a breath. Because honestly, I felt like I was going to tear off this person's head, but I didn't. And essentially, I could feel what was happening within my body. In taking that breath, I became very aware of the sensations that were arising within my body and things that could have easily triggered an aggressive response, a sarcastic comment, maybe even a passive aggressive jab. You know, we've all done it. Don't judge me. But the kind of response that can escalate things very quickly. Instead, I didn't do that. I paused, I took my breath, I composed myself, and then I responded in a way that was respectful and aligned with what I actually wanted to communicate. Second conversation, something similar happened. There were things said that I didn't necessarily agree with, but instead of reacting, I received them. I took accountability for the parts of my behavior that were brought to my attention, and I continued the conversation in a calm and collected way. Now, for me, that is not always easy, trust me. So the fact that I was able to do that, I'm genuinely proud of myself, because past versions of me, hello, hi, everybody dead, quick time in a hurry, nothing long. Now, if past versions of me were watching me have these conversations this past week, they'd probably be thinking, who the hell is this person? Either laughing or congratulating me for the work that I've done. I am definitely congratulating me for the work I've done, 100%. Now, thinking about these two conversations, I feel like my biggest takeaway from both of them isn't just what I said, but how I said it. The more I'm growing and developing as a person, learning the language to express myself clearly is one part of the journey. But the other part is being aware of how my voice is delivered, my tone, my intention, and how I want my words to land with the person that I'm speaking to. And it's because of this, I developed this framework that I'm about to share with you guys right now. And I find it really helpful. And the framework is to speak to people with sex, not sex, sex, but sex, secs. I spoke about this framework in an episode of Mentality. So I will link that episode in the description of this video. So if you guys want to go and check that out and see how my male guests responded to my framework, yeah, go and watch that. It's Mentality Season 2, Episode 4. But for those of you who are right here with me right now, let's get into it. So the speaking to people with sex framework is simple. Stillness, echo, curiosity, space. Let's break it down. S, stillness. Stillness is about pausing, grounding yourself before you speak. It's that moment when I was telling you guys before, when I literally said in the conversation, let me take a breath. That was stillness. I needed a moment to calm my body because I knew that if I spoke without a pause, that conversation would have gone very differently. The person I was speaking to, as far as I was concerned, was already low-key aggy. And so their ag started to trigger my ag. And I was like, listen, if I don't ground myself, this conversation is going to go left very quickly. So stillness first creates the space for us to respond rather than react. E for echo. Echo is about reflecting back what you believe you have heard, because so often in communication, we assume that we've understood somebody, and assumptions all too often create misunderstandings. So what does echoing look like in real time, in real conversation? An echo can look like, just so I'm clear, or what I'm hearing you say is, or am I right in understanding that what you want to say is? Now, echoing does two things. First, it validates the other person. And we know everybody wants to be validated. Everyone wants to feel seen and wants to be heard. Secondly, it allows them to clarify. They get the opportunity to say, yes, that's exactly what I mean. Or, no, actually, that isn't what I meant. And then now there's space for the conversation to become clearer. The next letter of our framework is C, curiosity. Curiosity was a real big one for me because I definitely had the tendency of telling people what things are. Oh, so you're saying, and yeah, I was that girl. But in developing this framework, I included this because I feel like it's so important to understand where the other person is coming from. Our minds are constantly interpreting things based on our own experiences, but our interpretation isn't always the truth. Now, you'll have probably heard me reference this book 10 million times, and you'll probably hear me reference it 10 million times more. But The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, if you haven't read it, I don't know what you've been playing at in life. You'll know if you have read it that one of the key principles is don't make assumptions. Now, that sounds super simple, but in practice, guys, let me tell you, it's actually really difficult. Curiosity helps us avoid assumptions because instead of saying things like, you said this, we then find ourselves having to ask, can you help me understand what you meant when you said, can you see the difference? Curiosity keeps that conversation open instead of defensive or presumptive. And the final S of our speak to people with sex framework is space. Sometimes the most honest version of your voice doesn't appear in the moment. Sometimes it appears after the moment. In the first of my two conversations that I had, I gave it a few hours. We had an interaction, and instead of responding immediately, I stepped away. I thought about what I wanted to say. Then I went back to the person and shared how I felt, how I wanted to be met, and what I believed was inappropriate. But I think it's really important to say that before I shared my concerns, I echoed theirs to them because they had come to me with something important to them first. And I didn't want to override that with my own feelings. Because I can't lie, ladies, we are very guilty of this. We are very guilty of people coming to us with a concern of theirs and then suddenly making the conversation about us and what we feel and what we're going through. And if I'm honest, I think we need to be a lot better at not doing that. And I think a way that can help us be better at doing that is, like I've said, first of all, taking a bit of space, echoing back to the person what you've heard about their concerns first, then sharing with them any concern that you have. But ultimately, always echoing back to somebody what you believe that you've heard. Now, I know I said always, but let's be honest, we're all in a practice here. So I doubt that we're always going to do these things. I think ultimately what I'm trying to share with you guys is just to raise our awareness of the ways that we can interact with people differently. So getting back to the conversation of space, in my second conversation, the space was definitely longer than a few hours. In fact, if I'm honest with you guys, it was actually a few months. Now, this was because this relationship is a lot deeper. It's a way more long-standing relationship. And I feel like both sides needed time for emotions to settle. And yeah, the space was essential. Because speaking in the heat of the moment isn't always the clearest expression of our truths. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's Pythagoras who is attributed to saying, in anger, we should refrain from both speech and action. Sometimes we need to step away, guys, like let the dust settle, allow the emotions to cool off, because clarity lives on the other side of that space. And when we speak from that clarity, I reckon that like we're just so much better at being able to repair and preserve connections. And as I've said that, it reminds me of something written by Fern Cotton in her book, Speak Your Truth. And I've just had to go and dig up the book to find it so I can quote it properly. But she says, we've been conditioned through childhood to suppress what we really feel. We worry about social exclusion if we speak honestly so often that we don't speak at all. And that really resonated with me because I think in many areas of my life that's been true. But my fear hasn't been a fear of speaking. My fear has been how I speak. I've been worried about speaking with so much fire that I'm just going to burn down the whole place. Like, to the point, it reminds me of, I always make this reference about myself, right? It reminds me of Cyclops from X-Men. You know, he wears those glasses to control the power of his eyes because if he takes them off, everybody are good dead. Yeah. Everything is burned down. The whole place is destroyed, top to bottom, everything gone. Yeah. And for a long time, I've lived with a kind of self-imposed silence as a restraint, almost like those glasses that Cyclops wears, because I'm concerned that if I speak what I really want to speak in the way that I really want to speak it, everybody are for dead. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be responsible for canceling the whole entire universe. But maybe the real lesson in this is not about silencing my voice. It's about learning how to wield it with clarity, with presence, with intention, and sometimes with just enough stillness to make sure that my truth lands in the way that I mean it to. So with all that being said, guys, you know what time it is, because this isn't just about me. This is between me and you. So let me ask you something. In what ways could you be using your voice differently? Are there areas in your life where you're holding back? Because I know there probably is, but that's not for me to decide. You don't have to think about that. Are there places where maybe you could speak more honestly about your needs? Maybe tell someone how they've hurt you, or make a request for what you actually want. Because owning your voice isn't just about the big dramatic conversations. I think that's quite important to mention as well. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest moments of everyday life. It might look like speaking up for yourself with your friendships or in your romantic relationships, maybe with your family, maybe at work with your boss, a colleague, or someone you're collaborating with. But it can also be in like the most simplest things, like, like in a restaurant, when food comes, you don't like it, and you just want to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's not actually. Actually, I'm really sorry, but this isn't quite for me. Would you mind taking it back? Or actually, I prefer not to pay the service charge, because guys, listen, don't act like it's just me who more times don't want to pay the service charge, because the service charge isn't actually worth what you're charging me. Like, hello, hi. And we just pay it. Where is the voice for the service charge? No, I'm not paying it. But you see the point that I'm making, right? That's using your voice. Or when you've gone to get this is the killer one. Ladies, particularly, you've gone to get your hair done or your nails done, yeah? And they spin around the chair and they say, oh, so what do you think? And you're sitting there like, this is actually disgusting. I hate it. Oh, no, it's fine. And then you get home and you have to do all your whole head all over again. No, it's long. Find your voice. Yeah. Actually, it's not quite what I wanted. Can we adjust it? Or if it's the nails, like, find a way to actually speak up for yourself. And ladies, while we're here talking about the lady things, hang on, ladies, let me just readjust myself. Ladies gathering, get close. Let's talk about this, because there's another place where a lot of us as women struggle to find our voice. I'm going to pause for a few seconds and see if you guys can think about what area of life that might be. If you said sex, well done, round of applause. Because when you're in the moment and someone asks you, so did you, and the answer is no, say no. Like, what, ladies, take that moment to say, I don't know, keep going, try something different, say something, but whatever you do, find your voice, ladies, because men don't tend to struggle with this in the same way. But honestly, that's a whole other conversation. That probably deserves an entire episode unto itself, because sexual voice, especially for women, hetero women, is a powerful thing. And I'm explicit about saying hetero women because I'm telling you, the lesbians don't have this problem. Yeah. The rainbow girlies are not struggling out here. It's only the hetero babes that are riding the struggle bus. Pun intended. So, finding your sexual voice is powerful. It's about being able to say what you like, what you want, what feels good, and what doesn't. And telling the truth when something has not been satisfying. Because let's be honest, oftentimes it is not. Ladies, we need to remember that our sensuality, our pleasure, our curiosity, these are not things to be ashamed of. They're part of being human. And reclaiming that voice is part of reclaiming our power. But I digress. So let's bring it back to you. Take a moment. You might want to pause this recording, grab your journal, or just sit with this question. Ask yourself, where in my life could I use my voice more fully? Where could I be more honest, more clear, more aligned with my values, with my truth, with the version of myself that I know is my highest self, the version of me that is the most connected to my essence? Ask yourself, what does that voice sound like? The voice beneath the noise, before the opinions, before the expectations, before the fear of judgment, before worrying about what anyone else might think. What does your truest voice want to say? That's what I want you guys to explore this week. And with that, I believe that brings us to a close of today's journal entry. A reminder that your voice matters and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply use it. Now, if today's journal entry has resonated with you, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss future journal entries. Share this episode with someone who might need to hear it, and drop your reflections in the comments, because I genuinely love to hear them and I'd be responding. And I'm just, I love it. Interaction with you guys I love that. So these journal entries will now be dropping every Wednesday at 8:30. Consistency, accountability, and all of that good stuff. You heard me say it at the start. I'm saying it again to reiterate and lock that in. Thank you guys for being here with me. Thank you for listening. And most importantly, thank you for being part of this conversation and keeping this all between me and you.